It's just before 5 p.m. on the 9th of June 2009. In the dispatcher's station of the New Mexico State Police Aviation Department, a call is transferred in from a 911 operator. A hiker, a visiting student from Japan, is lost in the mountains northeast of Santa Fe. Separated from her companion and having trouble communicating due to her limited command of English, she is getting very cold in the thin mountain air. As a ground-based search and rescue operation is organized, the decision is made to mount a helicopter search as well. The dispatcher contacts the chief pilot, who has already worked a full shift that day, including 3 other flights. He initially turns down the mission, citing high winds in the mountains. However, after rechecking the weather and determining that the department's other pilot can't go, he calls back and agrees to take the flight. It's nearly 7 p.m. by the time the pilot, accompanied by a police spotter, departs Santa Fe in the twin-turbine Augusta A109. At the time of departure in Santa Fe, it was sunny and 68 degrees. The wind was relatively light, though it had been strong the rest of the day. On an earlier flight, the pilot purposely diverted around mountains to avoid turbulence from surface winds gusting to 40 knots. He was also likely aware that the forecast showed rain, isolated thunderstorms, and relatively low ceilings moving into the search area that evening. The pilot's initial reluctance to take the flight demonstrates an awareness that conditions in the rescue area could be problematic, despite the benign weather at Santa Fe. That concern, however, was apparently outweighed by other factors. First, although he was not given specific details about the hiker's situation prior to launch, the pilot likely knew that a ground-based search could take a long time, diminishing her chances of survival. Personality also seems to have played a role. The pilot's colleagues described him as a disciplined officer and a skilled flyer, but also noted that he was an enthusiastic high-speed type who did not like to turn down missions. That attitude may have been reinforced by an incident involving the previous chief pilot, who was relieved of his duties after refusing to send pilots on a high-risk mission. Shortly after departing Santa Fe, the pilot and spotter arrive in the search area. It soon becomes apparent, however, that finding the missing hiker will not be simple. Talking to the dispatcher via cell phone, the hiker can hear the helicopter, but because of her limited English, she can do little to help narrow the search. At 7:30 p.m., the pilot advises dispatch that he is dealing with, quote, a lot of wind up here, but that he intends to continue the search. It's after 8 p.m. when he finally spots the hiker on the forested slope. With no good landing spots nearby, the pilot begins searching for a place to set down. The best option is a clearing atop the ridge, half a mile uphill from the hiker, who is now too cold and weak to walk up the mountain. As the pilot touches down at an elevation of nearly 12,000 feet, the helicopter is rocked by turbulence. It's now 8:30 p.m., 20 minutes after sunset. As the doors open, the pilot and spotter are greeted by a frigid blast of wind and sleet, commenting that, quote, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, or we're going to have 2 search and rescues. The pilot starts downhill on foot. At 9:15 p.m., the area commander for the search and rescue effort, worried about deteriorating conditions in the mountains, is patched through to the police spotter in the helicopter, who is still waiting for the pilot to return. He advises the spotter that they should, quote, hang tight in the helicopter if conditions worsen. It's nearly 9:30 when the pilot finally returns, carrying the hiker. On the ridge, the sleet has turned to snow, and the clouds have dropped menacingly. The surrounding peaks are now invisible in the darkness. As the pilot, spotter, and hiker board the helicopter and prepare for departure, there is little debate about alternative courses of action. As night fell, as the weather deteriorated, and as the pilot's search dragged on, 3 basic facts should have outweighed all others. 1. The hiker was in reasonably good condition. 2. The helicopter could provide shelter and warmth overnight. And 3. The risk of departing had become extreme. There's no way to be certain what was going through the pilot's mind, but the logic that lightly countered those facts is simple enough to discern. They had already come this far. They were on the verge of completing the mission, and they were only 15 minutes from home. On that night, the power of that logic proved impossible to resist. In the cockpit, the pilot points to a narrow gap in the cloud bank, indicating that this will be his departure path. As he lifts clear of the terrain, however, visibility drops almost instantly to zero, and turbulence rocks the aircraft. Soon the helicopter is flying an erratic path northeast through the mountains away from Santa Fe. 2 minutes after liftoff, the police spotter hears the pilot curse and feels the aircraft pitch up abruptly as the tail impacts terrain. Over the next minute, the pilot struggles to control the mortally wounded aircraft. Losing the battle, he eventually impacts a steep, rock-covered slope. As the helicopter tumbles down the hill and breaks apart, the pilot and hiker are thrown clear. Neither survives. When the fuselage finally grinds to a halt, the police spotter finds himself alone. Gravely injured, he manages to survive the night and is rescued the following afternoon. This accident is a near-perfect encapsulation of what's sometimes called the mission mindset or planned continuation error, a sort of tunnel vision that can cause even smart, experienced pilots to push forward down a path that leads to disaster. The mission mindset is a powerful force, one to which we're all vulnerable in our own ways. The story of this pilot, who should have had no illusions about the dangers he faced, is a grim testament to its sheer coercive power. Why would he commit to such an obviously dangerous path when there was a nearly risk-free alternative available? The answer seems to lie in a combination of factors: personality, institutional culture, previous experience, and intense focus on the task at hand that made it nearly impossible, in the moment, to step back and reassess. There's something else worth remembering. Even with all the unforeseen complications this pilot faced, he could have broken the accident chain at any point, up to and including the final decision to take off. This is a common factor that binds a great many accidents. Along the way, there are any number of places to rethink things, modify the plan, turn around. Wait long enough, though, and there eventually comes a point of no return. Choose poorly then, and all is lost.